Now, if you were just sitting down for the AI panel, I would strongly recommend you put on your seat belts, even if you're in the back rows, because our next keynote is by Aparna Chennapragada and moderated by Dilip Venkatachari. Let's give them a warm welcome. So both Aparna and Dilip had given intros, so I'm going to read those out. Aparna Chennapragada is Corporate Vice President at Microsoft, leading efforts to build an AI assistant for every knowledge worker. She's going to tell us what that means. Aparna has 25 years of experience in the tech industry as a computer scientist, product founder, and innovator. She has led products that combine intuitive interfaces with deep technical and AI boundaries, such as Google Search, YouTube Assistant, and Google Lens. She is a board member of eBay and has served on the board of Capital One and as the chief product officer of Robinhood. She has a bachelor's in computer science from IIT Madras. Applause, please. Because there's a couple more to follow, but. And a master's in computer science from UT Austin, and a master's in management and engineering from MIT, all excellent schools. When she is not working on AI, let's not talk about this now. We'll leave it to the end.
Okay.
As a surprise. So at least she's telling us that there's life outside AI. Dilip Venkatachari leads technology for major US bank. Serves on the board of a European financial institution and previously worked with Google, PayPal, McKinsey, and Goldman Sachs, and founded multiple successful startups. He has an MBA from Harvard, a master's from Rice, and more importantly, he is an alumnus of IIT Madras. And a proud resident of Godav. He still remembers those days. Dilip has been active in IIT alumni activities as the president of Pan IIT USA and has been on the Pan IIT board. A fun fact is that Dilip was the founding editor of the IITM campus magazine, Focus.
I hope it's fun for all of you.
Over to you, Dilip.
Thank you. So it's a pleasure for me to moderate someone who's so in the middle of all the AI developments. So, but before I begin, we had a very strong panel before us. So I decided to do the obligatory thing and ask ChatGPT how to, introduce this thing and kind of put everyone at ease. It basically said it's very important. It's formal. It's official. Do not worry about AI. It's not going to take over the world, or importantly, eat your pets, even in Springfield. But, however, if your Roomba starts eyeing your cat, ask for a firmware update. So on that note, just a couple of quick notes. We wanted to make this panel or this keynote very interactive. So we have totally about half an hour so that we can make up the time. And so we'll go about 15, 20 minutes and then open it up for Q&A. So first, Aparna, since you're in the middle of all of the AI developments and you have a perch looking at both consumer and corporate, could you just kind of speak a little bit about what recent advances in AI have been and kind of more like a state of AI?
Sounds good. I want to first announce that I've changed my name to Aparna.ai. And that's going to increase my valuation, I hope. But in seriousness, look, I think AI has been here since the 60s, or depending on where you start the clock, right? Marvin Minsky, the AI winter versus the specific change in the last few years is really since 2017, I'd say. And many of you are well in the thick of it, but just to ground the conversation, right? I'd say there are three things happening or have happened in the last few years that make us all even discuss this, right? So one is the attention is all you need, transformer architecture, the seminal paper from Google at 2017. But what it means in, if you translate it is, previously you had to train models for these specific tasks, right? And so what you now have is a general pre-trained model with a much more efficient architecture. So what that means is that actually you can train the large model that can learn general patterns, which is why it is able to do all these things in all these different situations versus each of these specific use cases requiring that. So I think that's number one. I think the second one is it's not just the model, it's the compute, right? Gigantic amount of compute thrown at these models and training the models. And then I think the third thing, and I think Prasanna mentioned that in the previous panel too, which is spot on, is the data part of it, right? The data to train on. Because if you didn't have the internet, if you didn't have all the content on the web, and if you didn't have all the data within enterprises, you couldn't really learn anything, right? So this combination of, I would say, the model architecture, the compute and data is the perfect storm that we are experiencing here with generative AI. I'd say the second thing kind of to, again, ground us is, I'd throw a couple numbers out there, right? 1 trillion, right? 1 trillion is both the number of parameters in one of the largest models, right, the LLMs, but it's also the amount of money that has gone into all of this across and will go into it since the last few years and going into next few years, all across, right, training, compute. I mean, just in the last quarter, NVIDIA made, what, $26 billion. Just the hyperscalers have invested about $50 billion. So this is, when people say, is AI hyped or is it underestimated? My answer is yes, right? It is both those things. And to me, it harkens back to, I don't know, some of us, we worked on the previous technology platform shifts here. Like you remember the highest investment in optical networks or the application level with pets.com or webvan, et cetera. So yes, there are a bunch of things that are happening in the space built on very sound foundational shifts here, that's for sure. But there's also a lot of hyperventilation and exuberance, irrational exuberance on layers of this AI stack, if you will, that will get eaten, subsumed, obviated.
And mediocre programmers who, as someone said, won't be around.
And that's a really good point, which is I do think one of the things about AI this time is that it, as someone put it, it raises the floor and raises the ceiling, right? An average person should be able to do more with the access to, say, ChatGPT or AI. But I think experts, I think the promise, and I'm very bullish on that, is it also is a set of tools that the experts can use to become better. You start to see that in scientific research too. Like
an exoskeleton of some kind, right? So now as it's a good kind of picture you painted about the overall. What about where is it working and what kinds of trends do you see?
Yeah, and this is the ground reality of it, right? And so when you step back, I think of these as in three buckets of things in terms of AI opportunities. One is what the obvious low-hanging fruit that we are all kind of looking at, which is just add AI, right? You have a bunch of workflows, bunch of experiences. You put the pixie dust of AI. You add a next token predictor kind of features to it. Then there's a second bucket I think of as the AI first, right? Rethinking of workflows or rethinking of use cases ground up using AI. And then there's third, which is AI feasible, meaning it just wasn't possible before, and now, because of both the model capabilities, but also the experiences and interaction that you have with the natural language, they're now suddenly possible. What we're seeing, what I see from within the company, but talking to other folks and really looking at the users and so on, is there's a lot of activity in the first bucket, the just add AI. And a good example would be you spend a ton of time, let's say in Teams or Zoom, you have meeting notes, you get a transcription of it, and you get AI to summarize the agenda or recap the meeting. That's a feature in an existing workflow. And there, I think Partha said it in the previous panel, the incumbents do have an advantage. The users are there, the patterns, workflows are there, and so many folks, like you see this in image and video editing tools, you see this in productivity tools, you see it in consumer tools and search, that you'll have this just add AI. I'm starting to see a little bit of a kind of the vein of gold that folks are kind of pulling on in the second bucket, which is the AI first workflows. But it's been very vertical focused, right? So there are companies that are looking at legal workflows. I think Prasanna talked about like the healthcare and taking these extremely, complex, lots of human in the loop kind of workflows and really thinking, what's the AI first compression of it, right? And then I'm not seeing anything yet. And by definition, because if you think about the AI native or what wasn't feasible, I think Mahesh in the previous panel talked about robotics, et cetera. There are things that just people haven't been able to do before. That'll naturally take time. And often people forget that. And this is, again, like I think about the App Store analogy here where mobile came out. I don't know if you guys remember, the App Store was pretty shitty the first few years, right? You just had the browser for a couple years. It was a rethink of existing, there was a flashlight app, for example, right? And that's the stage we are in this space.
It's actually very sobering in some respect, because if all of you look at, like the vertical applications you mentioned, where things, for example, in legal, there are very specific applications. And just, from an enterprise, we see a lot of existing roles, existing jobs getting automated a little bit better and a little bit better, but not dramatically rethought. And what you're saying is basically the next stage is going beyond simply automating, kind of, taking away maybe letting you drive in a straight lane well, but to actually help you make like driving decisions, integrate them into your FSD, if you will.
Yeah, 100%. And I think this is the part where I would say, I'm going to say the A word, agents. And I think there's a lot of, again, excitement about it. To me, it's less about, do you have an AI teammate that you can talk to and chat about? That's just the interface part of it. But it's the capability, right? As the models get better, again, they're just starting to get into reasoning. Like so far, if you look at the benchmarks of where the models are really good, they're in coding, specific structured language, right? Coding is specifically a structured language thing. They're good at visual classification. They're good at looking at an image and reasoning about it. They have exceeded or certainly reached human accuracy in these things. They aren't good at general purpose reasoning. They are not good at even like moral reasoning, for example. There's a whole bunch of slew of things they're not yet good at. But I think to me, one of the reasons why the next step here will be almost not just the N% improvement in the workflow that exists today, is versus rethinking the whole thing is, today any of these AI interactions are very on demand, like staccato. You say something, ChatGPT gives you back a response. But it's not proactive and continuous, right? If you think about an agent, it can be proactive, continuous, it works 24/7, right? We think about China and 996, AI is 24/7, and you can continuously work on the problem that it gave you, that you give it. And then I think it's also the multi-step complex reasoning there.
Right? All the examples that you're talking about kind of made me think about something else, which is, what's unusual about this is that we have consumers. When ChatGPT first came out, everyone was kind of psyched up about it and very enthusiastic and kind of, it totally made a huge impact. So within an enterprise, they are pulling in the demand. They're pulling in, unlike a traditional situation where many of you maybe have companies that you go out and try and sell to companies where you have to make a case for why someone needs the tool. Do you see that from your perch, this consumer pull being a factor?
Oh, big time. I think this is one of the flavors that is different here. In fact, there's a survey that we did of, I think about like 5,000 folks across different companies, and 90% of employees at the individual contributor level use AI at work at least once a week, right? Now, the definition can be loose. It can be just asking, like a chatbot a question and so on. But what's even more interesting to me is that that number goes down to like half when it goes to leadership, right? So there's a bottom-up pull here. But the other stat here is 50% of them do not like to admit to their bosses and their chain of command that they use AI. Partly because they are worried that they can come across ineffective. Partly there's a worry of being replaceable, right? But there is a bottom-up pull here.
So what does all this mean for, like, if you look at the implications for the future, where do you see this headed?
I think let me say it in a structured way. Look, there's like these layers of this AI stack, right? And there is going to be innovation and, kind of the next, where's next for each of these areas. To me, where my head goes here is, one of the challenges with AI right now is that, the state of the art is still a slot machine. Right? I don't know if you guys have used like prompting these things and coming back and saying, oh, it's not quite what you want. And then you prompt and you get back a completely different but like slightly useful answer. It's just not as useful, right? It just feels like you're interacting with a slot machine. And the other challenge is, as someone else pointed out in the panel, one of the hardest things as builders is that today's magic is tomorrow's commodity in this space. Right, 2 years ago, I remember, image generation, even like there was like OpenAI came out and said, oh yeah, here's a picture of an astronaut on a unicorn. Look at it, you can make it black and white, you can make it like photorealistic. And that was just mind blowing. And now like an 8-year-old just can easily like put that prompt and generate this, and pretty much every model can do that. So to me, I think there's a few what's next, right? First one, I strongly believe, I'm going to make some like very bold predictions, strong opinions weakly held. First, I think is the AI UI layer is going to dramatically change. Today, I think the chat interface, chat is great to communicate with AI, but it's like, the dial-up modem.
Emacs.
Right, like back to like, I almost feel like I hear that sound of the dial-up modem, and it's such a low bandwidth way of interacting with this powerful set of models, right? I think this is one of those cases where the intelligence is way more powerful than the interface that we have, which is chat. So one prediction I'd make is the AI UI is beyond chat, right? In some sense, I think every tool, every SaaS tool, every consumer tool that you use today will have the experience part of it, the UI part of it. You should think of that becoming a co-working tool with AI. Right.
I just want to make all the entrepreneurs just take note of these predictions.
Yeah, we'll come back to it. It'll be fun. If you think about it, it's already happening with coding. It started out with the autocomplete and chat with GitHub Copilot. But if you've used Cursor or any of these other, coding agents, it's already like a co-working space for you and AI, right? As AI gets better. That's number one prediction. Number two, this is somewhat of a department of obvious in the sense that that's already starting to happen, is the models themselves, right? So you started out with natural language. We got multimodal, right, with lots of training data. I think Mahesh and the YU folks will say there's spatial intelligence. That's a big new thing, right? There, the training data is hard, but synthetic data will go a long way. So the models themselves becoming much more powerful, along with the architecture's changing. So I do think that right now we're very heavily oriented towards the transformer stuff, which is great for all the applications that we're seeing, not great for for reasoning, for example. So that's, I think, on the model side, on the technical advances. Compute's it has got to get optimized. Right now it's in layman words, in the COGS for many of these generative AI applications is ridiculously high. Right? And that curve has to go down. And it will go down because right now it's a very unoptimized thing. Like there's many tasks where you don't need the large foundational models. So that's going to happen. So that's I think
I wanted to go back to one of the prediction that came from, I think, a question in the earlier panel that Divya or someone else, Divya asked, which is the stack going to change? As a huge buyer of technology, one of the things I am beginning to think about or worry is that we've invested so much in all the middleware. When people start having agents, will it start reducing their importance dramatically? And maybe just fast forward 5 years, will we be in a place where like Klarna example, are you in a situation where all of those tend to be like Workday and Salesforce and SAP and all tend to be less critical, but the agents talk directly to the databases, and so you have to reorient your stack.
Yeah, there will be a rewiring of the stack. Now, I mean, that is not to say the incumbents can't transpose or expand how they operate. To me, like one way I think about this is, there's that software is eating the world. I think the model is going to eat the middleware, right? I think there will be a squeeze from bottom, kind of the model as it gets more powerful.
Not the pets, but just the middleware.
It's just the middleware, not the pets. But I do think that some of the capabilities will get subsumed. There is no way around that. But I do think also that role-based, what we are seeing is the maximum productivity gains come from really understanding the depth of the role or business processes. So there's no reason why, for example, a Salesforce or some other company can't really rewire. Right? There is an innovator's dilemma, but there's obviously an opportunity, and the field is open.
So the whole thing may get rewired. So just, I know we just have some time, I want to give enough time for questions, but maybe a closing thought. Can you just, for this group here, they're in kind of multiple different areas, right? Some of them are entrepreneurs looking to develop software, some are maybe enterprise buyers, some are just trying to figure out maybe what they should tell their kids to get trained in, right? So any thoughts, any advice for like the future?
We're all, first of all, kind of, I feel like it's very exciting because it's one of those areas where all the advantages and the learning curves that a lot of people have are reset, right? In many, many ways. So to give you an example, like I know of a friend of mine who's like an amazing graphic designer. He's learned like Adobe Illustrator for like 10 years and like he's the best at it. I have one of the other predictions I'd make is like in a few years, the AI will generate the UI. Right, so in some sense, all the learning curves you have about using Excel for 15 years or like Illustrator for something else, they'll get leveled, right? So in some sense, I would say maybe to your last point about where you invest your personal time or your family or students, I'd say like learning tools versus learning how to think, like that'll become even more stark, right?
The tools will get a lot more powerful, so you don't need to do what the tools can do. You
Yeah.
just need to know how to use them and interpret.
How to use them and interpret, that I think is one thing. But as builders, I think one of the big challenges, and I grapple with it, and like our teams grapple with it too, which is, where are we building crutches versus laying bricks, right? In some sense, we're in this like mid-air suspension where the models are getting better, the cogs will go down, there's new use cases that will be possible now that weren't possible 2 years ago. And so if you're trying to solve a specific business problem, the default conventional wisdom is solve for today, right? And then really figure out if you need to put duct tape, do that. If you need to build new like middleware, do that. But in this case, there is a real chance that all of that is throwaway and the model eats that in a year. So are these just crutches for the short term, or are you building invariants here, right? And there's no perfect answer, but at least like a few rules of thumb that I've been kind of thinking about and trying to implement. One is like look for primitives. Don't try to like design one-off interfaces. They will get like better. But look for these primitives or functions that you can build within verticals. That's one thing, right? Anything that makes contact with the proprietary data, like that is likely to be somewhat of an invariant. And I think the second one is, again, this is more of an incumbent advantage, although it needn't be, is being as close as possible to the users, right? And so that, again, like the model may get better, some of the experiences may get better, but if you're close to the user and close to the user problem, you're somewhat immune to the wide shift.
Just I'll add one more, which is as a buyer more than a maker or a creator, one of the things that we see actually these advances can have a difficult effect on stopping you from buying. To say, wait a minute, I talked to 3 companies and they're much better than the ones I was about to buy from. So you know what? Let me just hold off. Let me let the cycle kind of play out a little bit, because if I buy right now, it's going to get obsolete within maybe 12, 18 months. So all of that kind of becomes a factor in us thinking about kind of the future.
And I think, yeah, there's a quote that, I forget who said this, but it talks about we all have like Paleolithic emotions and medieval institutions and godlike intelligence, right? Like that's true for enterprise too. Like the change management around these things will be very, very slow, right? In some sense, that's always, so if you're in like, I don't know, tech Twitter or AI Twitter, you're like, oh my God, the world is changing and the singularity is near, and then, you know, you lose sight of the fact that at the end of the day, we are talking about like how people do work, at least on the enterprise side. There's a lot more of like structured change management that'll be needed.
And you're spot on. Change management is probably the more critical one to be able to get this to be absorbed. Now, I'm just looking at the clock. We would love to start taking questions.
You know the drill. Ask a question, step up to the mic, please.
Hey, Ganesh Rajan, Jamuna, 82. Power. That doesn't matter. So questions for both of you. I think I want to get your perspective on regulations, governance.
Yeah, I can go first. I think you know, there's probably like multiple layers of this, and it's the thing that actually is also different in terms of AI, not just the consumer adoption and the pull here, which is because in the previous platform shifts, if you think about the internet and like the DMCA, as well as like mobile and social media, and how regulation was somewhat like post facto. Now there's a lot more involvement, like if you think about European Union or even the US, the AI Act and so on, right? And I think, to me, I think that's, you know, this may sound like a, you know, regulation apologist, but I actually think it's a great thing. Meaning, this is one of those technology shifts that will have deep societal impact in multiple ways, not just in the obvious shallow, hey, like there's bias and so on. It is really, when you're talking about these productivity gains, how do you bring the entire society along, and how do you actually make sure that this is change management at a societal level? So having government and having regulation from the ground up is actually a positive thing in my mind. The trick is to figure out where you're shutting the door on technology shifts, and there's a geopolitical angle here too, right? So I think that is the core of it, which is, for example, if you say, hey, like, you know, open source models, right? If you think about the China and US dynamic, etc. So depending on what hat you wear, there are very real risks about kind of like having the open source models and so on. So this is to me, the short answer is, I think regulation is going to co-shape the evolution of this, and I think it's not a bad thing.
So as someone who spends a lot of time living, you know, with regulations and compliance, I'll tell you, it's probably the most significant contributor or you know, influencer on the decision. So 2 or 3 things. First is, some of them are the obvious ones. You know, you want to make sure, for example, a model can essentially be repeatable, right? You know, for example, if you put a chatbot in front of a customer, the scary thing is this darn thing tells them different things different times. And so there's a regulator sitting and saying, wait a minute, you told this customer something, you told the other person that they can apply for a credit line increase. It's not good, right? So the second one is, you know, obviously explainability and bias. And bias is particularly an important area in healthcare or financial services, where there are reasons, where there are people who would, you know, double check you to make sure you're actually indeed correct. So it's not just like a search box, but if, for example, if you decline a customer's application for credit for a home mortgage, and that decline was not explainable in the normal sense. So what most of us end up doing is put rule-based overlays on these things too, which you can debate whether or not that's helping, but it actually speeds up the process. And lastly, there are a lot of issues to do with data. A lot of internal testing and things happen on customer data. And obviously, it's very hard for you to have anything that goes outside to any, for example, even for code generation. If you're working on code generation that involves any data, you know, leaving your customer premises that happens to be your customer's data, it's a pretty dangerous thing to enable happen. So what most institutions do and is to put in a lot of guardrails. The good news is a lot of those guardrails have been put in place already, and the regulators now are a lot more, I would say, knowledgeable. They've kind of come up to speed more on the technology and are coming to the point where they're able to do things without being hamstringing the process.
By the way, this is a great startup opportunity too. I do think that the tech, just like we had data governance, I think the AI governance piece is going to be critical here. And like, if smart people don't solve that, it's going to be a dumb, like, hamstrung approach.
You're about to say it'll be solved by people who should not be solving it, who they are about to solve it.
All right, yeah, so can you hear me?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. Sarang, 87 batch, Mandak. So yeah, my question is basically on the energy footprint side. So do you envisage a scenario where developing an AI system and maintaining it may become unsustainable because it's an energy hog? I mean, and has there been any thought in that direction? I mean, is it going to become something like Bitcoin, for instance, right? When Bitcoin, the cost of mining it's so energy intensive, right? So that it may not.
Yeah, and this is, so the question is about, hey, like as we think about these are like compute guzzles and therefore like, energy guzzling platform shifts here. I think there's a short-term, medium-term, and a long-term thing here. Long-term, everybody's excited about the quantum, like moving away from silicon. There's a whole new thing. I'm not sure that is the only bet that you can like hold on. Short term, there are multiple efforts that are going on. I mean, obviously within NVIDIA, but there's other companies where you're looking at heterogeneous compute architectures, but even like down to actually looking at transistor level. Hey, what are some power saving mode? And then there's the higher layer thing that is already happening, right? Model distillation and pruning. These are methods. These are approaches to say, hey, right now we have this giant like brain that we are asking all sorts of simple questions and like difficult questions. We should be able to like smartly toggle between, maybe you just need like a much more efficient small model, etc. So I think short term, everybody is going into this optimization route. This is where I think academia, and there's a separate, probably a deeper conversation to be had around the other thing that is different about this time, which I think I do worry about, compared to internet and like mobile, etc., is that there was a massive public and government and academia involvement that is foundational to so much that came after. And this time, if you look at all the innovation that is happening and the resources, they're all in these, like a few research labs and hyperscalers. So we're really, really not looking at some of these fundamental questions.
I'm very optimistic on that front, whoever asked the question. Because a lot of what you're seeing right now are the very early bleeding edge. As things get better, if you look at the effective societal impact, it's actually a lot more muted. I'll give you a very mundane kind of analogy. If the number of people, if the task is automated to the point you reduce the number of, say, people commuting in, you're actually taking people and cars off the road and things. So if you look at the overall impact, apart from the compute costs, getting a lot more efficient and things happening in silicon, the models getting smaller and so on, the footprint is going to decrease, but the impact energy-wise on kind of the overall outcome is actually going to be, I think, more positive net than what it appears to be right now.
Dilip, yes, but there is that I think it's called Jawan's paradox. I think Prasanna, you were talking about it too, which is the idea that if something gets easier to do and the curve goes down, then actually paradoxically people do a lot more of it, and therefore it actually becomes one of those expensive like resources, and the bottleneck never goes away. So I fully like this is a
both ways.
Yeah.
Hi, Sri Jagannathan, still from IIT Kharagpur.
It's okay.
I'm curious about perspective, right? It's especially in the early stages of an industry, it's often common to be incremental. So you ask, what's going to happen in 2025? What's going to happen in 2026? And a lot of entrepreneurs try to start building pieces based on what capability exists. And that's good. That provides a foundation and sense of possibilities. But I'm curious whether, especially Aparna with your vantage point, in many ways Microsoft has structured the workflows of an existent society along with other players, but certainly you play a key role in how people operate, how businesses operate, et cetera, right? I'm curious whether you have a view from, let's say, 2030 backwards. And you look at 2030 and forget about, will there be enough infrastructure, enough compute, et cetera, but you hypothesize what can the world be in 2030, right? And you paint that picture. What would that picture look like for industry, for communications, for businesses, for individuals, for health? Do you have a macro picture like that?
I have a stab at it, and I love your prompt and the nudge for it, because one of the things that becomes easy when you think about building is you say, oh yeah, look at the customer problem and solve the problem and so on. But the step function stuff comes often with technology or the vision first or the science fiction first. Like if you look at it, again, like I can tell you my personal experience back working on search. It wasn't that folks said, oh, let's look at product market fit for this, right? I think folks said, oh, assume that the web can grow 10x. What kind of like a product should we build? It's antithetical to say that now it's all like lean startup, product market fit, and so on. Again, there's a room for that. But I think these meaningful big technology shifts, I think that's the bold like science fiction working backward that is required. And those will be the huge value captures here, right? But I will say this other thing, which is, like maybe the scar tissues there, which is the being early is also the same as being wrong in these. So I built this proactive digital assistant that should be able to like be your stream of consciousness, help you with anything, get stuff done, proactively assist you with like, your day, your work and so on. And it's probably was, the interface was great. The intelligence was way too brittle. So I think that's the nuance here. If I had to make one stab at kind of like what's the 2030, I would say the core problem and the core interface I'm most bullish on is a thought coprocessor for you, right? You can call it an assistant, you can call it an autopilot, you can call it copilot, what have you. But this idea that there's an AI agent that solves the attention overload that we all have, right? Whether on the consumer side or on the enterprise side. And that mediates you and the world.
I would just add one more to that. I would basically say, I would not try and predict the future when you're at an inflection point, even as short a horizon as 5 years might sound, because the pace, you would not be able to accurately get kind of the timelines. But the 2 or 3 things I would say will be definitely will likely happen. Maybe it's 3, 5, 7 years. First and foremost, it's the jobs and roles will not be as we define them. It's almost, if you think, there's going to be our interface with the computer is going to change. It's not going to be how we do it right now. And that's going to change a lot of roles and jobs. For example, functions within companies where you hire a financial analyst, where you hire a legal, there is going to be a material change in that, I think, in as short a period as that. Second, I think there is going to be a significant displacement of labor that's going to occur at least in the advanced economies. And so I think those are the 2 kind of specifics that I think I can feel comfortable about.
100% agree. I think like another way I'd put is like the model will not only eat the product, but will eat the organization. I think there will be like if you think about what is the AI first company, it's maybe 10 agents, a bunch of compute, and 2 supervisors, right?
Last question there.
Hi, I'm Supreet, 2016 batch Jamuna. My question is, what do you see as moat in the Gen AI era for SaaS companies? Because we are seeing the old moats of data, UI, UX, all of that go away, or may go away in near future. What do you see as the new moat?
Okay, so as I would say, it's basically the moat is understanding of the space quite a bit. Just take a practical example, Salesforce. Salesforce understands kind of the efficacy of how to maximize revenue and customer contacts and so on. Being able to translate that into a very different AI-generated space, being able to go beyond the sales rep and being able to help maybe the finance team, maybe help other folks, but living and being very deliberately focused on the thing that they know best. And that's the moat, I think. The moat is not the buyer, but it's the expertise. It's kind of what the company does best.
So I have a pretty spicy / controversial response to this, which is there is no moat. And I think this is another prediction, we can come back to it, which is, the analogy I think of is like YouTube. If you think about 1950s, there's one channel, right? It was hard to produce like a broadcast station, then the cable channels came, and then YouTube and Instagram, you have like the cost of creating content is close to zero, and therefore you have like million things that bloom. And many of these, there's still a power law. So there's a few folks who make a lot of money, but that pile is bigger. I predict that is going to happen on the software tool side as well, which is between writing software and coding agents, and the fact that there's an opportunity to compete with the pre-GPT heavyweight, stack with this lightweight, 8 agents and 2 people approach, means that you can go really narrow and like very specific in terms of the workflow, to your point about understanding the user and the problem space, and build that. Now, the next layer of that, once you have that unbundling, there will of course be an aggregation and discovery layer that will have to come up, because there is YouTube, there is Instagram, because that's where you go to discover these things. So I predict that that's going to happen on the enterprise. By the way, my email signature is the best way to predict the future is to invent it. So I would end also saying that's also important. Like, we can prognosticate a whole bunch, but really, like, as builders, being in the arena and building the future is how you have the best shot and best posture.
So be in the game right now and go help make it move forward. Thank you.
I do have the last question here. Excuse me. Naren Nayak, 1979 Electronics, 1981 MTech Computer Science from Godal. So my question is this. So we are talking about the tools becoming so intelligent that there is less effort in doing a certain set of tasks. And that's a growing set of tasks. Should we IITians be concerned with all that spare time we are going to have? Because everything is taken care of, is it going to lead to, psychiatrists becoming more busy treating us?
Go for it.
I was just going to say, yes, you should be, but I have a solution for you. Just join me in helping me brew beer at home.
Yeah, I think people have predicted the whole like leisure time, what will happen, and for like every generation of this technology and platform shift. I like go back to the fact that there'll be enough activities that generate new jobs. Now, that doesn't mean it's going to be painless. I think this is one where a lot of the tech bros just get like very glib and say, oh yeah, like labor, oh too bad. Like we had it in agriculture, we had it industrial, but this time it is hard because it's not just a physical to mental kind of a transition. It's a lot of the knowledge work, and so it is going to be painful. And we all have to be responsible to go do that. Sorry to give a very sober answer, but I do feel like that's one of the most important things we all, as we're building this, we'll have to take into account. Having said that, there will be new. This has to be a net addition to GDP and net addition to economy, which means there's a lot more to do for everyone.
Just on that note, kind of the last theme. This is the first revolution that's going to go after people who are highly skilled, and kind of do that in a much faster way than highly skilled people ever expected. So it gives us a lot of time to travel and see the world. So
thank you very much. This has been a wonderful keynote. Nice round of applause.